My favorite fan film? Wow, there are a lot of good ones. Reign of the Fallen. I thought that one had beautiful cinematography. It was really nice to see more dramatic films.
You really think you could sneak into my home without me knowing?
In one of my favorite films, it was George at a bar, and Jar Jar walks in, it sounds like a punchline to a joke, and it was.
It's Control-C, Alt-C, Delete-C.
Chad Vader is a great series, and the Lucasfilm feels the same. I think many of them would cite that as one of their favorites.
Yes. No. I don't know. Continue talking.
Star Wreck. In the Perkening is a brilliant film. Unfortunately, it suffers from being almost too good. Cinematic quality, gorgeous visual effects, paired with a parody story in Finnish. Some of which works in English and some of which doesn't.
Siksi mä lähden henkilökohtaisesti johtamaan tätä tehtävää.
Ja se niistä voiton mahdollisuuksista sitten.
You want to say, well, like, what is my favorite fan film? The kids that did the Raiders movie.
The Raiders adaptation is probably the greatest fan film of all time and will remain the greatest fan film of all time. I will say that right now. I don't care who does what. They did it with a VHS camera, nothing fancy. They're in Mississippi, they're down in the South, and they just spent their summers recreating this movie. That's awesome. I mean, you cannot beat that. And they recreated The Rock, and they almost died recreating The Rock, and he's hanging off the Jeep window, and they're doing all this stuff. And if anyone was to ever do it again, it would just be like, oh, that's just like the Raiders adaptation, which is why, I'll say it again, it's the greatest fan film ever made.
Raiders, when I saw it, it felt like something that was incredibly real. Indiana Jones felt so well crafted, and I wanted nothing more than to be in that world.
I rode on the school bus with Chris and had asked to borrow his Raiders of the Lost Ark comic book, having no idea what a fateful request that was.
A few months later, I called him up and I said, hey, I want to do this remake of Raiders of the Lost Ark, and do you want to help? He said, sure.
Chris gives me a call and says, hey man, you know that movie I was talking about? Well, we're making it, and we need somebody to do the special effects because we just can't do it. So I'm like, okay, and I do a little photography too, and they're like, hey, that's great.
When Chris and I started, we had no idea how we were going to accomplish remaking a $26 million movie on, well, nothing but our allowances, and naively thought it was going to take a single summer.
It ended up just being the most gargantuan project. We had no idea it would take us 7 years.
The level of ambition, spending 7 years, they age in the movie. I mean, it's funny and you can't make fun of them.
We learned how to do things that we hadn't done before, and the rest was film school on the fly. There were certain scenes at the beginning that we shot, and it looked horrible.
So we kept doing it over and over again.
And it helped here that we were remaking a known film. There was something that we could hold up as a yardstick and gauge ourselves against.
We worked from memory for the first handful of years and cobbled together every image, every bit of music, everything that we could get our hands on.
Raiders was re-released in the summer of '82, and so we watched it 2-3 times and just tried to preserve as much to memory as possible.
They try to bring in a tape recorder, but there wasn't any videotapes back then. There was no DVDs, and he didn't have the money to see it a bunch.
Eric sat down one summer and hand drew well over 600 individual storyboards.
He made 632 storyboards, and they fit exactly.
It was never a question of what we were going to do over the summers. We would all just reconvene, pick up where we left off, and keep doing Raiders.
I love that film. I was watching it with a bunch of guys, and we're just going, oh, they're not going to do that scene. Oh my God, they did that scene! Jesus Christ! And then you're thinking, who the hell did they let them burn a building?
There's a scene in the movie where this character gets his back on fire. And yep, that got to be in the movie. It says, we gotta remake shot for shot for shot. So Eric gets a fire retardant jacket because, you know, it's fireproof, so hey, it could be protected from anything, including gasoline. Which he poured on his back over the costume. I didn't know what the hell it was. I'm just there as a camera man going,
where were their parents? This is unbelievable. This is completely inappropriate. And yet it's absolutely awesome.
It's incredible that we didn't burn that house down. We were so lucky that there wasn't more damage to that house than there was.
This film that we made couldn't be made today, and that's because it did seem a more innocent time. It was a perfect little window. Camcorders had just arrived, so the technology was just enough there so we could pull it off, but the world hadn't sort of clamped down on some of the innocence and the freedom that was there.
That's what Raiders for me was. Forgive the comparison, but it was Lord of the Flies gone good.
It's hard to say objectively whether or not you're watching Raiders of the Lost Ark while you're watching Raiders, but for one reason or another, the Raiders adaptation fully works.
You can tell these kids loved it.
Okay, when you see the dog on their shoulder being the monkey.
My favorite gag is that they couldn't get a monkey, so they put a dog on the shoulder and had a string Sieg Heilig.
Originally, we had storyboarded it where we were going to be using a kitten, and kind of scrapped that idea. And I had this great dog, Snickers. I could rough him up, throw him over my shoulder, and it was that great boy and his dog kind of thing. I said, hey, Eric, let's just use Snick. And he went, okay, that's cool, that'll work.
I made movies with my friends in our backyards when I was in elementary school. That Raiders film is just on a whole different level. My first instinct is like being a jealous 11-year-old. Why couldn't me and my friends have done that?
The magic is that Chris works as Harrison Ford. His eyes, he believes he's Harrison Ford.
You want to talk to God? Let's go see him together. I've got nothing better to do.
After a couple of segments, not only can I hardly wait to see it, I want to see how they do it, and I'm rooting for them to pull it off, and they do. And by the time they get to the truck chase, which for me is the high point of both Raiders of the Lost Arks, the fact that they do it and they're diving off into swamps, it just blows my mind every time I see it.
The fact that they remotely approximated the truck chase. You know, I was pretty impressed by that. I don't even know if they had licenses to drive at that point. That was like, damn.
Stunt shots shot from moving vehicles, driven by kids who may or may not have had their driver's permit at the time. Thankfully, we saved that towards the end when we'd really sort of gelled as a team.
As far as going under the truck, for me, that was one of those raw Raiders adaptation moments where we just sort of did it. You're like, we'll just go for it, and so I did.
And seeing the crowd's reaction to that, we usually get the most cheering during the truck scene.
The first time Chris Stroumboulos ever kissed a girl is in that film.
I know that sounds too perfect, but it was really true. It was my first on-screen kiss and first off-screen kiss, too. And we did multiple takes.
They didn't do 15 minutes, or they didn't do the trailer only. They did the entire movie. And you're watching all of this and you go, they're never going to do that scene. They did it? Oh, well, don't worry, they'll never get to the sub. Oh my God, they got a sub. Kids got a sub? How?
It took me 3 years to get that submarine. There was a military park in Mobile, Alabama, where they had all these retired World War II ships and planes and a submarine.
Chris spoke with one Captain Defley, asked, hey, we're doing a remake Raiders. We'd like to use your sub, can we? And was told no. Chris went back the following summer, asked again was told no.
I just kept trying. You know, it's like, God, come on, you know, we need a submarine. It's right there.
Finally, Captain Defley said, fine, all right, just leave me alone. Yes, but we're not closing the park down. So we actually shot around bemused tourists that day. I'm not really quite sure what they made of us.
We were working in a vacuum. I mean, we were just some kids on the Gulf Coast that wanted to remake a Raiders movie.
They don't know what they've got there.
Their story is unbelievable. That really happened. That guy had that much passion for that project. That's a great American drama, a great tale. I love it.
This is the thing, is we were just doing it for ourselves. We had no plans of doing anything with it, no plans of showing it to anybody. We were just doing it for ourselves. After we finished it, we all went our separate ways. We all went off to college and had forgotten about it. Sat on our shelves for 15, 16 years until it was rediscovered.
Then somehow a copy got made and it handed in Eli Roth's hands, and he loved it.
When I invited him to Button-Up-A-Thon, Eli Roth had an old videotape from his NYU days. He said, Harry, if you have any time, play this, and he handed me a videotape.
About 8 o'clock in the morning, the projector breaks down. So they're futzing with the projector, and so Harry grabs the tape and puts it in and screens it. House lights up, people talking, eating breakfast, no introduction, nothing.
You have to understand that when it played after the worst double feature in the history of Button-Up-A-Thon, and the audience was about to revolt. And we had the breakfast break, and I play that Raiders thing. By the time the boulder's rolling after the kids, everybody had stopped going to get breakfast and was sitting down watching it, going, how are they going to do the next bit?
Just as we're about to go into the truck scene. Truck? What truck? Stop.
The audience booed, even though they knew that we were all about to see the premiere of Two Towers. They booed the premiere of Two Towers because they wanted to finish seeing this fan film.
That may well be the best bit of flattery we've ever received, you know. So they screened the Two Towers, and everyone loved it, of course, but apparently people walked out of the theater saying, you know, I wanted to see that Raiders movie.
Tim League and Eli and I began the search for where are these kids? there's a story here.
So Eli brings along this VHS bootleg of our film to his own pitch meeting at DreamWorks.
He was like, hey, I did not make this. I don't know these kids. I just came across this tape, but I really think Spielberg would like it.
So the head of production watched it and called Eli and said, this is great, I'm going to show it to Steven. Calls Eli back. Steven loved it. He wants to write the guys a letter of appreciation. What are their addresses? And Eli has no idea who the hell we are. All he's got to go on is our names in the credits.
Eli Roth had tracked us down through Jason and internet and phone calls.
Eli Roth called me saying, hi, I'm Eli Roth. I'm trying to track down Jason Lamb. I thought it was a prank call.
That's how I got a letter one day saying Spielberg has seen your Raiders movie and he loves it.
He basically said, I wanted to tell you how much I really enjoyed your loving and detailed tribute to our original Raiders. He goes, it was really great to watch, and I look forward to seeing your names up on the big screen someday. You know, sincerely, Steven Spielberg. It's like, wow, this is just like, I'm gonna die, you know, so awesome.
He told Empire that it was the greatest piece of flattery he and George Lucas have ever gotten.
We were all sort of bewildered, and this letter and Eli contacting us actually brought us all back together, because we hadn't spoken to each other in years.
And that's what led to the Alamo Drafthouse Theater in Austin inviting us months later to come down and have a proper standalone screening. Whatever differences we had before, they were washed away. We hugged each other and picked up where we left off in the friendship.
They had all left film behind. They basically left that dream back there, and until we found it, resuscitated for them, sort of built a fandom for it. Once it played, and it played extremely well.
Clearly, it resonates with people. You go into a theater, you see people go off on it. That transcends cardboard vines. That's real filmmaking.
It got through to all the big magazines, and we agreed to an exclusive with Vanity Fair. And in the 2004 Hollywood issue, they gave us quite a bit of page real estate, which was great.
Chris, Jason, and I were in Los Angeles. The Vanity Fair article had just come out, and we got a call from our agent who said, Spielberg would like to meet with you guys in his office tomorrow at noon. And at this point, I was able to manage everything pretty nonchalantly, but at that point, I think I felt sick.
He called us up to the office, and he opens the doors and comes in, and, you know, kind of a short guy and, you know, very energetic, and he goes, hi boys, how you doing?
Sitting on the couch in his office, it's one of those moments where you sort of leave your body, and sort of look at yourself and saying, is this really happening? It was not the goal per se of making our film to meet Spielberg, but it was certainly a pipe dream.
He said something really incredible that even topped the letter. It was, he said, I watched your movie, and I watched it again, and I wanted to let you know that it inspired even me. And I think that was probably the greatest compliment that we could ever have gotten.
They did something that I don't think's ever been achieved in all of fandom. I mean, they remade Raiders of the Lost Ark. There has to be an award for that.